Testing, testing, audio testing, audio test. Alright, we're good. Alright, so, pre-show, roughly 10 minutes. I wanted to start a little bit earlier, but things were a little bit off. So, yeah. Make sure camera looks alright. Seems good. Let's see. Oh crap, I left my topic list upstairs. Knew I was gonna forget something. There we are. Topic list has been gotten. I want to get some paper as well, since I'm here. I know there's some tests I want to pull off today. This shouldn't be too bad. Lovely little test sheets. This paper should be okay for that. Nothing too fancy. Topics. Okay, we got 5 minutes to official start. Just hanging out, really. Sure, I can do a little bit of pre-painting right now. Since I'm overdue, my motivation to work has been minimal, to say the least. So, really want to just be playing with that a little bit. Lay down some color on my palette. Caps are on there pretty good. More of this blue. Really? I don't know what it is. Every time I drop something, it always seems to roll into oblivion. It doesn't matter if it's something round or not either. It drives me nuts. And I haven't even picked up a brush and I got paint on my hands. Big surprise! So I don't know how much of this painting I'm actually going to do today, but I do know that I want to, at the very least, talk about a bunch of stuff and is just smear some color around, because if like bare minimum, I just want to smear some color around because I'm overdue for that. I don't know if I've really touched this one yet. I think that was the only one I picked up. Maybe that one. I really thought I'd grab another one, but I guess not. Alright, 4 minutes. I feel like it's been way shorter of a time than that. Or longer of a time than that. You know what? My focus looks off. I don't know if I can change that at this point. There we go. That looks a little better. It's still really overexposed. I've been trying to mess with the camera settings, but it's like really off. Just have to keep dipping the brightness down, but didn't really want to do that. Could also be a white balance issue now that I'm thinking about it. I gotta put this in. Get my other account now too. Make sure I get the announcements out that I'm doing something. Alrighty. Couple of minutes here before we get the official start. That doesn't look too bad. I feel like it might just be my laptop screen being screwy. Brightness seems really low on that. Huh. Guess I'm just used to my tablet screen now. But everything looks considerably better there. GDQ is live again. Alright. Got a countdown going now. 10 seconds. Alright. Hey everybody, Ben here from Cinder Studios, and welcome to some sort of live show. Live art tips and tricks. Or art tips and tricks live. Today is a tutorial day. But it's all kind of different things mashed up into one. What I'm going to be doing today is hopefully working on some of this painting, showing you guys some techniques, cool tricks, things like that. Really anything that I can kind of look around the studio and go, oh yeah, I'm doing this or I'm doing that. And just different things I've been playing with and that kind of thing. In addition to that, I've got 5 different video ideas that have not made it to the channel yet, and they're things that some of which have been sitting for a while. Some of which I actually recorded and didn't like the video, so I was like, I'll do it again later. Actually, that's what 2 of them are in particular. And the rest of them are just things that haven't quite come out yet as a video that I decided, you know what, let's just shove them all together rather than making separate videos for all 5 of them. And just go at it. So that's what I'm going to do today. So to start things off, I'm going to keep it simple, actually probably work backwards on my list, and play with 20-year-old acrylic paint. It's like, okay, what? So let me set my project aside. I'm grabbing a sheet of watercolor paper I have sitting here. I have a tube of Liquitex Dioxazine Purple that came out of my mom's art stuff when she was in college, and it's been sitting around with my stuff ever since. Not ever since, but ever since maybe 2008 or 9 that I started kind of leafing through her stuff and taking some things for myself, because she doesn't use it anymore. And this is a really, really old tube. It's a 22 mils, which is the same as I think a lot of watercolors are in 22 mil containers. That's a 44. That's an 11. So it's similar, yeah, similar to a watercolor. Watercolor tube is going to be about a third less paint than that. And it's about half the a little under half, maybe about a third of a tube of a regular 2 ounce. This is 0.75 ounces of paint, and it's purple paint. And what I find to be rather interesting, one, is the Liquitex logo actually doesn't seem to have changed a ton in 20 years, 30? So what's it say on the back of this? This particular copyright listed as 1980, so we're talking maybe 25, even 30-year-old model of a tube of acrylics. The new Liquitex ones are in plastic tubes, which to me I feel like is a little sad that they kind of downgraded themselves into plastic tubes. At least, in my opinion, a plastic tube is a downgrade from a metal tube, but semantics. But yeah, that original Liquitex logo is still the same one that they're using today, which I find to be rather fascinating. In addition to that, it just says acrylic artist color, Dioxazine Purple, value 2.2. And it says number 168. Maybe that's just how many colors they had at that point in time. Who knows? On the back, it gives a little tiny hue chart. BP for blue purple, purple for the middle, and then RP for whatever else. And I think, yeah, there's a tiny little star right in the middle for purple, which is like pure middle of the road. Yeah, it gives you a value, it gives you a chroma, which I'm guessing is probably light fastness, but I'm not really sure. And then vehicle acrylic polymer emulsion, and then carbazole dioxazine PV23. Same pigment information you'd get on a tube today. Now the thing with any old paint tube is if it starts to smell, that means there's mold in it. But this, I'm pretty sure, is still good. You just, ooh, a little sticky. Okay, yep, ugh. Oh, yeah. Jeez. I should not have smelled that. So, oh. Okay. Don't smell the tube. Generally speaking, this should be thrown away, but the question today is, despite being separated and probably moldy, could you actually still paint with the stuff? It's still soft, it hasn't dried, it's separated a little bit, like I mentioned, but is it still possible to paint with stuff that is actually that old? So, we'll see. It's a little more resinous than it should be, but it's still acrylic. Still nice and bright. And it still works. Just like that. Now I might take it a little step further and grab a little of my GAC 100, which is just an acrylic extender. It's like acrylic paint without the paint in it. It's also a little bit more fluid. So I give that a little bit of that. I think it's also glossy too. So, but I think Dioxazine's already a glossy purple to some degree, so I'd probably mix some of that in to bring it back to life and redistribute the emulsification of the acrylic. But yeah, it is every bit as useful as it would have been 20 years ago, if not a little bit smelly. So I'm standing back so I don't get another whiff of that, because that was really gross. Oh wow, yeah, I can smell that from here. Oh, jeez. Oh. Alright, I'm gonna quit using this, because that smell is ridiculous. Good lord. Okay. So yes, you can paint with acrylic that's 20 years old if it doesn't smell like somebody just threw a dead cat in a rotten squirrel or something on your palette. Wow, okay, jeez. That smelled like something really awful. Okay. So, that answered that question. You can paint with 20/30-year-old paint as long as it's still wet and you don't mind the really rancid smell. God, I'm gagging just thinking about it now. Let's move on. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, let me get going on this painting here. I want to talk a little bit about how artists learn from each other. And that's something that I still might make a longer video about this, but I wanted to at least kind of touch on it a little bit today, because it's been sitting in my head for a while. So, artists, when we learn from each other, there can be a little disconnect, I think, for some people that seem to think that you can't really learn from artists. You can just look at their work and see, like, okay, they made a thing and that looks nice, and I'm making a thing and that looks nice, or maybe it doesn't, depending on how you feel about your own work. Oh, I wanted to put stars in here. That's right. I have to get some white out. But like, okay, so maybe you're an aspiring artist and you want to start trying to really kind of learn from someone like me or another mentor or friend, or just some random artist you found online, which again also might be me. And one of the biggest things is just learning through imitation, to see some work that an artist did and trying it out for yourself. Maybe not in the same medium. Maybe you can grab something else. For example, in like my daily sketches, this goes back to 2010-ish era. Let's see if I can dig this up. Maybe it's newer than that. Didn't think it was. Oh, maybe. This is 2009. That's why. Probably not going to be in this one. I got too many sketchbooks. There we go. So around that time I found an artist by the name of Chris Cold. Still follow his work. He's on DeviantArt. Really awesome artist. And I did this sketch. Get this. There we go. I did this sketch here on the left around that time, so like probably mid-2010. I was kind of looking for inspirations. Now he's primarily a digital painter, so this is in ink, totally different, but I was just trying to analyze sort of the composition, some of the shapes, and he actually kind of used these weird little rune shapes, which I kind of changed and moved around a little bit, and kind of kept using them to some degree. And actually I was looking back at this sketchbook when I was still writing that other version of this video, about learning from inspirations, that I saw this and I was like, I thought that was an original idea. All these funny little shapes here. I don't know if I can. Probably not. But these strange little. I bet I can get here. Do it with a piece of paper. Use the contrast of this. So I started kind of coming back to these shapes that are mostly just horizontal and angular shapes like this. I'll throw some dots in from time to time. I've done a handful of paintings with shapes like this, and apparently I pulled that from some of his work, and like 10 years ago almost now. So it was interesting for me to look back and go, wait a minute, I thought I was doing this sort of original thing, and turns out I was just, you know, calling back to an inspiration, calling back to an artist that made an impact in my work. And then going forward, I became an artist that I ended up sort of implementing some of their designs and their concepts into my own work. So through a level of imitation, I kind of built my own working system based on some of the stuff that I liked from their work, but also tweaked it and sort of made it my own. So that level of imitation and replication through certain levels of experimentation is a great way that artists can learn from each other. And also sort of along those same lines, why isn't this cap going on? What the hell? And there it rolled away. Of course it did, because everything rolls away. Just through kind of analyzing other artists' work and being like, how did they do that? Because maybe you're analyzing an old master and you don't have the luxury of actually asking them or trying to ask them, trying to email them or something. So it might be like, I don't even want to know how they try to do that. It's ridiculous. It's just like really subtle oil color blending or something like that. Some of it might just be staring at a painting and going, okay, what do I do with this? How can I make this, and how can I try to make it? And that kind of goes back to that experimentation stage, and doing it again and doing it again and doing it again, and trying to figure out how it ends up working for you. Let me get some stars in here. There we are. So when you're, again, trying to learn from other artists, it's one of the best ways to do it, if they're an artist that's still living and working today, is just to ask them. Find them at a show, send them an email, whatever it happens to be. You see an artist or a technique or something, most people are generally very friendly online, unless you're not friendly to them, in which case they're probably going to ignore you, or if they're really busy. Some artists are just really busy. But if it's a matter of, and also some artists like, well, that's a trade secret, I'm not going to tell you how I did that. I've run into a few artists like that at art festivals, where I'm kind of trying to guess, and they're just sitting there smiling, and then I'm like, you're not going to tell me how it's done? They're like, no. And it's like, darn, I have to keep trying to figure it out for myself. But a lot of times artists will want to tell you how they did it, and I think that's a really fun thing that people tend to overlook. They seem to think that everything is a guarded trade secret. And yeah, some things are. But for someone like me, it's like, no, I'll tell you exactly how I did it. Because maybe it'll inspire you to create something of your own. And I think that's a really cool way to pass on your work and your legacy to people, is being able to have somebody else kind of doing your technique. That's kind of what happened with my friend Jim. Is that he would totally told me how he did it. I didn't even ask. He's like, let me tell you how I did it. I'm like, okay. And then I got to pass, and then whatever it was, last year that I got to pass his technique on as well. So that it's a very different way of approaching art and things like that. So like, if you're gonna be like, hey, how does this artist do this? Ask him. Just ask him. It's just that simple. Sometimes it's just that simple. Again, it's like, if the artist is dead, or maybe doesn't speak English, do your best to translate. But you can really push some ideas further just by sort of imitating working with other artists' styles and other artists' techniques, and then kind of rebuilding that from the ground up into something of your own, something that you can do and change it just enough to make it your own. And that's when things really start getting fun, I think. Alright, so that's two of the topics. I'm going to end with the big one, the one I actually wrote the outline for. That's over here. That was the one I was supposed to do earlier and didn't. So I want to jump over things a little bit because I still want to work on this painting a bit. Because one of these involves a little bit of a demo, at least sort of. So I'm gonna hold off for that. I need a little yellow in here. Indian yellow, I think, is probably good for this. Just something to change my hue ever so slightly. Maybe a little. Oh, that's right. I've got this ochre over here I can borrow on. PY43 yellow ochre. I don't know why I get so excited about that. Some of that. Just mix it all together. Let's get a slightly warmer tone and color in here. A little browner. I'm going to be dry brushing some like flames on top of this, so I really want to make sure I have a nice general base color to this. So one of the videos that's been sitting sort of on my list of things to make and things to talk about for way longer than it should have. Actually, I think I did a recording of it in like February, maybe. And what I came up with, I was like, I just don't like the way I presented this. I want to rework this. And it's also just sort of small enough, I guess you could say, of an idea that I could, like, it was like 40 minutes. I was like, I can probably cover this in less time than 40 minutes. That would be ridiculous to make a 40-minute video about this. So I was thinking about my favorite color schemes for paintings. I think it probably came out of something I saw on DeviantArt forums, which is actually where a lot of my video ideas seem to come from. But it was an idea of, do you use the same colors all the time? And well, for someone like me, that I have a limited set number of painting tubes, although I do have a lot of different colors and different types of viscosities and color lines and stuff that I can lean on. But at the end of the day, I have a limited number of those things. So it's really a lot about the overall painting itself. Like, is it a red piece? Is it a green piece? Is it a blue piece? Or whatever it is. I just realized I gotta fix the chat thing, so I'm actually getting all messages. I don't know if anyone's jumped in or not, but if you are here, feel free to drop in the chat and say hi. But yeah, so there's something to simply picking sort of similar colors or something like that every time. And while I definitely have some favorites, I have to say that I don't use them all the time. And I was kind of looking over a lot of my recent paintings, and I think I've only used sort of my favorite sort of color scheme, so to speak, at least one of my favorite color schemes this year, maybe once or twice of the like dozen or so pieces I've done so far. That's big pieces. I mean, there's some little ones in there that are some and some other ones. I actually want to tilt this up a little, maybe. I don't know, because I'm getting that glare. I'd have to bring that up quite a bit. Like that. No, that's not helping. Alright, well, anyway. It's going to be shiny. So, what exactly are sort of those favorite ones, the ones I love going to and love using quite often? And I'll actually mention in my sketchbook when I'm doing certain pieces, certain things like that, I'll actually make color notes, whatever was in my head. So the one I'm working on now, is a piece called the Sunstone. My notes to it are burning fire magic, paint on slate, black canvas. So I knew I wanted to work sort of from the ground up with that. Find some other ones in here with color notes. I mean, not all of them have color notes. Some of them do, some of them don't. This one does. I really want to do this one. Rich blue sky, faded silver structure, very distant foreground silhouette. So that kind of gives me a general idea of a lot of that stuff. But when I'm picking sort of some of my favorite colors, or specifically my favorite colors to work with for paintings, one of those is what I call summer colors. So let me find a painting in here that utilizes summer colors. I'm sure I've got one somewhere. There's a lot of them around. There we go. This is a piece from September of 2016. It's called Valley of the Newborn. And this is what I mean by summer colors. So, blue sky. Hopefully where that glare isn't. That's a little better. So, blue sky, generally either warm or cool gray rocks. This one actually utilizes both. And then a lot of sort of like greens and yellows. So, big green grass areas, that the rich golds in the foliage, and things like that. So when I'm doing a piece that I want to be sort of brighter, generally happier, I'll write down summer colors, and this is what I mean by that. It's just works that really kind of utilize that mostly I don't want to say mostly cool colors because it doesn't feel that way. But it really kind of is. I mean, with the exception of sort of the warm browns and the rocks and the tree branches, there's a lot of cool colors in here. Even the yellow greens would technically be considered cool colors because they're leaning greener rather than redder. Yeah, so this is one particular set of colors that I really love using, especially when I'm doing anything mountainous and things like that. I actually have a subset of summer colors, which I refer to as mountain colors, which is specifically darker, richer greens for pine trees, in addition to usually cool gray rocks, like almost exclusively. And that kind of color usually lends itself to being pulled from color inspirations I grabbed from when I took my trip out to Colorado a couple of years ago. Not sure if I've got a mountain color piece down here, at least within easy accessible areas. Here's a mountain color one. So this is summer colors, but it's also mountain colors. Before I was talking about those symbols and things like that. This is where one of the first times they started coming out in my paintings. But so this is a good example of what I would call mountain colors. Wow, that's got some residual sticking paint on that. I'm going to clean that up later. So specifically, there's no warm browns in here, except for maybe a little bit in the figure. And it's really just all this, the cool grays, and then, again, the blue sky, and then rich foliage colors. And this is what I would call mountain colors. It's a subset of my summer colors, color schemes. I'll leave that out so I can clean that up later. Okay, so outside of summer colors, I have a recurring use of yellow skies. And I love doing yellow skies because they give me an opportunity to play with something that's both feels natural, but it also is very sort of supernatural in its own right. Actually, one of the oldest pieces I've got that uses it is a piece I've debated painting over from August of 2012. It's actually a time-lapse painting of this here on the channel. And that's this piece. I don't remember what the title of this piece is. I really don't. Oh, that's really, really overexposed. I'm sorry. Again, it might just be my screen. No, it's definitely not just the screen. It's hard to see, but there's a cloud up in here and some mountains in the back, but it's really bright for some reason. It's the camera, I think, is finally starting to go. So I do apologize for the overexposedness of this. But yeah, you can see at least the base contrast in the bright gold in the sky. It's actually a lot closer to a yellow ochre than what you're seeing out of the lot brighter of a color there. But that was one of the first times I played with yellow skies, and after I did that, I was like, I really enjoyed that. A lot of it was just me playing around, experimenting with color. This one is a painting process video on the channel as well. This one is called Bridge of Destiny. So the piece I really... there we go. There's the full thing. Another piece I really like. It also might be the glare of the piece trying to come through. This is actually one of my favorites from my own works. I have a handful. It doesn't get a ton of love, unfortunately, but it is one of my better pieces too, even from recent years. This is 2015, so it's now a 4-year-old piece, but still really fun. But this is another one, sort of like a yellow sky kind of piece. So although this one plays with some underground themes as well. I'm gonna have to look at some of these pieces. They're getting a little dirty in storage. And this one I can show because it sort of qualifies as a yellow sky. This is another one with a newer one with a painting process video on the channel. Although this yellow is a lot more dull, and you get a little more of a just kind of a grayer tone to the whole thing. But yeah, that's another example of sort of a yellow sky piece that tends to look real nice. So outside of the yellow sky works, I also love playing with actually where this piece is going to be going, and that's fiery colors. Colors that look like something's burning, or just strictly focusing on warm colors. One of the quickest examples I've got of this is, I think this piece was called To Lands Unknown, and it's a really fun space painting that I did back in 2014. And this is pretty much the prime example of this, is this bright, warm colors. Where it gets sort of the brightest or the hottest, it's almost white, all in those spots. Really cool piece. I actually have prints of this that I sell at shows and stuff. Easily one of the I don't want to say better pieces I've done, but it was definitely really fun because I played with a lot of blues in the shadows and really kind of pull all those colors out. Something that's actually a little bit newer is a piece, I can't remember what this one was called either, something along the lines of Path of the Fallen Heroes or something like that. This is not one that I kind of focused mostly on the sky to get that color with. There we go. Yeah, so you get that bright transition from red to yellow, and that nice soft subtle transition between them is really fun to get, especially with acrylics. People see this and go, how'd you get that blend like that? That's got to be oils. It's like, nope, that's acrylic right there. You just got to use enough paint to do it. And my last favorite color scheme is grayscale plus red. It's not one I do use and play with a ton, but it's really fun to pull out maybe once every couple of years or even once a year, is to do a grayscale piece with some sort of a red highlight. So, wow, that's being screwy. So this one, I don't know how well this will show up even, yeah, so it kind of fades back with a lot of grays, really dark at the front, and there's like this trail of blood kind of coming through that really kind of focuses your attention in. Excuse me. And most of this is not quite grayscale. I think it's slightly off. It might be slightly cooler of a gray, but it's really fun to use just a little hint of red somewhere in a grayscale piece to really kind of build up this like quick contrast and really kind of focus the viewer's attention in. It's not something I do a ton again, but it's really kind of fun and simple. And if I am doing like strictly a grayscale piece, or again a piece like this where it's slightly off, a little bit cooler, it's usually my used paint that I pull off for something like this. So this is pretty much all just the sort of grayscale monochromatic, and then I'll sign that piece in red. So the corner signature is a bright red, usually a cadmium. And so it's my way to kind of give that little bit of a bold statement to it, is to then sign in red. So those are my 4 favorite color schemes. Really fun to work with. If you saw anything that kind of caught your attention, something you want to try, let me know. I'm not copywriting a color scheme or anything like that, but it's really just a just a way to pursue color in different ways, and find different colors to kind of work together. Tammy Youngblood in comment, my favorite of yours is Cave Dwellers. Thank you. I think there's prints of that. I'm not sure. If you are looking for them though, and they are available, because I don't know if they. I know I have prints of them in my box, but I don't know if there's any available online. If there are, it's redfishbowl.com, and find my name, and you can get back to me that way. But yeah, so it is one of the better pieces I've done in recent years, I'd say. I think it's about a year old, that piece. So another thing I wanted to talk about today is I wanted to compare some professional acrylics, or maybe some artist acrylics, because they're kind of the same thing. A lot of talk I do on this channel is about professional paints are better than student paints, because of course they are. And one thing I kind of have touched on briefly in the past has kind of been that professional paints vary a little bit in between brand, but not a ton. But some of those differences can kind of make or break your experience, and sometimes finding the right brand for you can actually make a pretty big difference. So I've actually got 4 different brands of high-end acrylics in the studio right now. I have my regular golden acrylics. That's a big tube, happens to be. I have some Utrecht colors. I have one Liquitex color, because that just happens to be the one that I like. And then I have some M. Graham acrylics that were gifted to me by a friend. So 4 very distinct high-end brands. I had only kind of really known M. Graham for their oils and for their watercolors, mostly for their watercolors. So it was fun to see that they actually had an acrylic line. And a friend of mine was like, hey, do you want some of these colors, because you've never tried them? And I'm like, sure, that's what I do. So I actually got 3 different colors. I've got Cad Red, a Quin Violet, and a Quin Rose. Actually, these are the same pigment, which is really rather fun, because they're very different colors. But yeah, so I was like, okay, let's play with them, see how different they are. And with any paint, anything I drop on my palette, it's always a matter of what's the mixing like, what's what's everything like, and actually one interesting thing about them is what's on the tube, how easily accessible is the information. Actually, I should note one thing I do with all my paint tubes is I put a dab of the color on the cap. That's something that I personally do. That's not something that exists on any of these tubes. If you buy them in the stores, you'll have, like, the golden has actually a painted swatch on the tube, but the rest of them usually just have a color of that, or something of the sort. But the color on the cap is something that I do personally in the studio. So what is sort of the difference between all these two? I actually have, I think I've got all of them out on the palette. I actually did prep that ahead of time. I was thinking. So before we kind of dive into the individuals in terms of the paint viscosity and stuff like that, I kind of want to just highlight a couple of things with each of the 2 brands. We're going to go from, I guess, right to left, because I feel like being Japanese today. The Cad Red, in this case, I mean, I can't compare all of the same color, because there's no point in me having all of the same color in 4 different brands, because that would be a waste of money. So obviously there's going to be a little bit of difference between all of them in terms of coverage, in terms of tint strength, so I'm not worried about those. I'm talking about a little bit of, basically, viscosity between all 4 lines. And that's something that you will find with professional acrylics, is that level of heavy body viscosity differs a little bit, and it's something that can actually actually trying to really kind of change the painting experience a little bit as you go. I'm actually gonna get my stool over here so I can sit down. Oh my god, can. So the M Graham, I think it's probably the most crowded of the terms of like design on the tubes. Um, it gives you the basic color name in the front in the series, at least in terms of really needed information. The back's going to give you light fastness, pigment information, and all that other junk. But it's a fairly plain tube design, but what can you do? One thing I found rather interesting about this stuff is that it's a little bit thinner, a little more resinous than any other regular acrylic. So when I dip this, it kind of pulls a little bit more. I get a little more of a drag to it. It almost has a drip to it. It's really kind of soft, especially for a heavy body as well. So it feels way more, I would say, a lot closer to a soft body than a heavy body. But they call it a heavy body, which I find to be rather interesting. At least I think they do. I don't think it actually says, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, it's a little bit softer than I'd be used to for any kind of other acrylic paint. But it does have a nice spread because of that reason though. You have a really nice level of spread with it, and that color actually goes quite a lot further than a lot of other heavy bodies do, because it is again just a little bit looser, and that is something I actually do really appreciate. Let me go ahead and mix this some other color in here. Oh, hello. I've got that Indian yellow back here, so I'm just going to mix this with the golden back in here and make just a slightly different color. A little bit of an orange, but yeah, it's going to mix in, with any other paint because it's acrylic and that's what it does. The Liquitex Heavy Body, I've gotten actually away from using a lot of the Liquitex Heavy Body colors. Also, one thing that really bugs me about this tube is that it's upside down. But it's also right side up at the same time. Like, if you're going to stand up your tubes like this, everything's going to be backwards. But if you're going to hang them like this in the store the way they normally are, at least for those, like every other tube in the store hangs like this on top of the cap. These hang here or stand upright. And they did think about that, but like when you see it next to all the other tubes, it looks stupid because it's upside down. But whatever. They want to be different. That's what they're doing. So the Liquitex ones, if you get a newer style tube like this, it's laid out a little bit differently than the older style tubes. But the way the new style tubes are laid out, they give you a sort of printout swatch. They tell you right on the front heavy body, which is really appreciated, especially if you don't really know what you're buying. Liquitex Professional Heavy Body Acrylic Brush and Blue Hue. It does list light fastness on the front, which is really very useful, especially if that's something you're going to care about. And in the back, this is something that you're going to see, actually, I think, with maybe all of them or not. I'm not sure. Yeah, all these other ones. Is it tells you transparent, semi-transparent, or opaque. This one, the M Graham, I don't think it tells you anywhere on the tube, which is kind of weird to see with any kind of paint, not just with acrylics. With watercolors do it, gouache does it. I'm pretty sure most oil colors do it. So not seeing that on the tube, I think, is really unusual. Yeah, so you're going to see that on the back of the Liquitex tube along with the pigment information. They just list the pigment codes, not the entire color name, but that's not really important to have the entire color name. And one of the reasons why I got away from using a lot of the Liquitex is the longer these sit, they start to kind of gum together a little bit and get a little more stringy and resinous. So right now they're really soft, really buttery. They feel like I would say a lot more like melted butter, because it's holding its shape, but you can still kind of feel a softness to it. But again, the longer these tubes sit opened, actually sometimes even unopened, that'll actually kind of get a lot more plasticky, and that thickness will build up. And that's something I've actually only ever seen with the Liquitex tubes, which is why I tend to not use them a ton. especially knowing in certain colors that I have that will sit for a long time. Actually, my cadmium reds tend to sit a little longer than they used to, because I've been using alizarin crimson a lot. But if it's going to sit for a while, and it shouldn't gum up the way that does. And I wish I had an example of the way that happens, but again, I only have one tube. So again, Liquitex heavy body, definitely another choice favorite. Great coverage, great spread. Anything you'd expect out of a professional line of paint. So I'm not, ever really concerned about that. With any other color, it's gonna mix in. It's gonna be perfect. No really cause for concern. But again, it's like because this is slightly thicker than that. The next one I've got is actually some cobalt blue pure from Utrecht. Utrecht, it's an artist grade paint, but honestly, I feel like it's right on par with any professional lines out there. And it's made actually right out of Brooklyn, New York. And it has been for the past, I don't know, a long time, 100 years or something like that, or almost 80, maybe 75, 80 years. At least the acrylics, anyway. The oils, I think they've been making longer, because oil paint has just been around longer. So, what's that? The cobalt. This is what I would say the next level up in terms of thickness. Actually, seems like I organized these properly. It's just slightly thicker than the Liquitex tubes. It holds a little more peak to it, and you get a little bit more body. But it's generally still very, very smooth. And when you have a little more body like that, maybe don't get as much spread, but really all you need to do for that is just wet your bristles, and then you're fine. Easily one of my favorite paints. I actually have a couple of their blues. I have the Cobalt Blue Pure. I also have a Cerulean. If I'm looking to supplement colors at a slightly lower cost of any of my other tubes, specifically the Goldens, because they tend to be really expensive, and I can supplement with a color, I will absolutely go for the Utrecht ones. They're really great paints. When I was sort of on a more tight painting budget, specifically for my acrylics, I was using almost exclusively the Liquitex Heavy Body and the Utrecht, with a lean towards the Utrecht paints, because they are just like maybe $1 or $2 cheaper per color, which is really kind of nice. And finally is the Golden. Actually, I didn't talk about the tube of this one. So again, front, color name, that Series 4 heavy body, fairly standard, everything on the front. The back, pigment information, vehicle, light fastness, and semi-transparent. Now, Golden does something, one extra thing that I love, and that's why I love their paints, among other reasons. Oh, hello. I got some paint skin here. Okay, a handful of extra things that they do. Their paint swatch on the front is hand-painted. At least I think it's hand-painted. It's totally a brush mark. I don't know if they just roll them past in the factory and the brush goes like that. But pretty sure all of these labels are hand-painted. So that adds an extra thing. So the color you're getting, like, it's not a printout. This color and this color might differ a little bit between the printout and the actual paint. This, you know exactly what color you're getting, which is really nice. Also, depending on the color, actually, there are these black bars here, which because it's a color that is very opaque, more is black, versus Indian yellow that's transparent, you get the black bars, and you can actually see if that color is transparent or not without them even telling you. I think they do tell you on the back or something like that, but you can see that for yourself. It's not a matter of like, is it transparent or not? I don't know. You can see it without even trying, and that's something that's actually I really appreciate about the paint. Additionally, I'm comparing to a big tube. The small tubes are identical. They're laid out exactly the same. The label is just slightly smaller. So it's not a matter of this tube's bigger, so it has more information. No, the small tubes and the big tubes have the same information on them, at least for the regular heavy body acrylics. The opens are a little bit different. So the back is where things get interesting for the Golden tubes. And this little chart up here, which I don't know if you guys can even see on camera. But this is the thing that I love the most about Golden, is they give you 4 different slider bars, and they tell you transparent or opaque, matte versus gloss, thin versus thick, and low tinting and high tinting. Specifically the low and high tinting thing, that is something I wish every single paint company did, because having that information before you buy the tube is huge information. And they also kind of give you a general understanding of pigments and applications and all that other stuff. I mean, instructions. Every tube's going to have that, but those slider bars on top mean everything when you're picking up a new color, because you have no idea what it's going to be like, and having that extra bit of information really kind of helps inform your purchases a lot more. So the Golden is by far the thickest of the 3. It's still soft, still soft enough to work with, but in terms of any heavy body goes, you can build really, really thick textures and peaks and pushing that color around to do really interesting things. And honestly, I feel like it has the best spread, outside of maybe the M-gram, because it's still a little bit thinner. It's going to spread more. This is thick, and it holds those peaks and shapes, but it has absolutely the best spread out of all 4 of them, probably combined. You can do a lot more with a lot less paint, and not sacrifice the viscosity because of it. So let's look actually at 4 different types of professional acrylic. Again, Golden, Utrecht, Liquitex Professional, and the M-gram. All of them are great, but again, my preferred at the end of the day is going to be a tie for second, Liquitex Professional, and Utrecht, with a lean towards the Utrecht. And then my day-to-day colors are always going to be the Goldens, as long as I can afford to buy them, just because they are, I really feel, just a cut above all the other ones. But whatever paint you choose to work with, whether you're choosing one of these, or maybe you have another acrylic you like working with, that slight difference in viscosity really makes a huge difference, especially once you're painting. It doesn't affect color mixing. It doesn't affect it doesn't affect there was some other thing that didn't affect, but your color mixing is going to be the same across the board. You can mix all of them together interchangeably. It doesn't matter. They're acrylics. You can do whatever you want with them. But finding just maybe slightly thicker or slightly thinner viscosity can really make or break sort of your painting experience, I think, especially if you're going to be doing it long term. So if you want a little more coverage, a little more fluidity to your paint, I'd say lean towards maybe the Liquitex or the M-gram. If you're looking for something a little thicker, go for Utrecht or Golden. But that's just my opinion, having tried and used all of these colors fairly extensively, with the M-grams being a fairly recent one. I added just to try, but it's been fun trying them. I'm going to keep using the colors while I have them. Not going to buy any more of them, because I kind of like what I've got, but it's really an interesting way to go about playing with your colors and mixing them as well. Alright. I'm actually mostly waiting for this to dry so I can start dry brushing it. Yeah, so let's look at four different specific high-end acrylics. I started writing alien on the left. What? By a bunch of gibberish letters. I don't know what. I'm not really sure what you're asking. If you're maybe backtracked a little bit to some of that earlier stuff. Oh, this stuff. This is what you're asking for. Yeah, earlier in the live show I was talking about picking up runetic symbols from an artist by the name of Chris Gold. You can seek back to the beginning of the stream for that lesson, but basically it was a matter of imitating someone's work, letting it sit in my sketchbook for a while, coming back to it and realizing something I was doing in my artwork today, actually I basically copied from somebody else 10 years ago. So yeah, I put them on this sheet of paper because they weren't showing up well in my sketchbook on camera, so I just blew them up over here. Yeah, alien writing. That's sort of right. All right. So, I've got one more sort of big long lesson for today, and then I'm actually going to paint some stuff, I promise. Uh, so the video that I kind of wanted to record for this week, or actually technically last week now, was a video about canvas, specifically rough canvas versus smooth canvas. And there's a lot of different types of canvas. There's linen, which is not canvas, it's linen, but it also affects texture and everything like that. It's really interesting when you start thinking about canvas texture and how it can really affect your painting, as well, both style and process, as well as just the overall outcome of what you're doing. A good way to kind of compare canvas textures is to compare actually two different substrates entirely, canvas and wood, because wood is considerably smoother than canvas. You can do a lot more different stuff with it. It doesn't absorb in, and it gives you a little more detail, a little more time to work, because the paint doesn't dry quite as fast. Canvas textures are actually kind of similar in that way. So there's actually a different sort of approach to it, though. So generally speaking, there's 3 to 4 different types of canvas textures out there. There's rough canvas, which, as the name suggests, it's rough. It's very, very rough. Depending on whether that be something that you're stretching yourself or something that you are buying in a store. Actually, I think I've got some pretty rough canvas around here somewhere. This one's pretty rough. So this piece I showed earlier, To Lands Unknown, this was a very, very rough piece of canvas for 2 reasons. One, because I only gestured it once and I didn't bother sanding it down. 2, because it's a very cheap weave. It's actually not even artist grade canvas, it's canvas drop cloth that I bought at the hardware store. You can tell because there's a big seam at the bottom, like that. This stuff is a super, super, super loose weave, and so the canvas itself is considerably rougher, almost feels like a really smooth sandpaper, so to speak. And you can actually see, if you look closely, probably not on camera, but you can actually see white spots on the back of the canvas where that gesso, when I put that layers of gesso on top of it, kind of seeped into the canvas and filled all these extra pores and extra holes in here where the canvas was so loose of a weave that it could do that. Now, a canvas that you're going to buy in the store is going to be one of several different textures. It could be medium texture, which is my personal favorite. It can be a smooth, or sometimes called fine, and then extra smooth / extra fine. All of these textures definitely have their uses, but not all of them have the uses for the same thing. And that's kind of really what I want to talk about today. Peter Draws has a nice system writing similar style. Honestly, it's pretty basic. I think a lot of artists kind of end up doing stuff like this. Yeah, my stuff, I pulled out of Chris Cold's stuff from like 10, 15 years ago, stuff he was doing then. And this is the same thing. I picked it up and changed it and did some different things with it myself. Actually, come to think of it, I don't know if this will actually show up on camera or not, but I'm sure as hell gonna try. I actually have a series of Photoshop brushes that I made that are those shapes. I don't know if these are even going to show, but I will certainly try to, almost. That's really a lot of glare there. You can see them a little bit there. Camera's being really screwy today. But yeah, these are 27 different sort of stamp style brushes that I designed for Photoshop. And they're actually available through my Patreon, I think. I'm not sure. I gotta update my Patreon. It's got a lot of old stuff on it that I really gotta revamp and do. That's probably gonna be a project for next year, to be honest. Anyhow, so canvas. Yeah, so 3 to 4 different types of of canvas textures. Rough textured canvases generally speaking, again, I like that, and they tend to imply a lower quality. So looser weaves, and you tend to need more gesso to kind of smooth it out. A tighter weave and gesso, and the gesso adheres to it a little bit more, tends to give you a smoother canvas, but not always. It's not always mutually exclusive that way. Sometimes you could find a tightly weaved canvas that just happens to be rougher. Um, but I'm actually not sure. I should double check my book over here. Um, single. Yeah, they kind of play with different levels of weave. What they call single weave, which is just like crisscross like this. That's usually where you get the rougher texture. There's combination weave, which is like one and then like two, like that. And then there's a double weave, which is like two and two, and they're braided like this. And that kind of is just one of those things that kind of tells you a little bit about the canvas texture and how tight that weave is and how smooth they can get it. Now, a lot of people will say that a rougher texture is better for landscapes. Sort of. Again, I like a medium textured canvas. This is one I picked up at the art store recently, and this is a fairly medium slash maybe medium smooth texture. Really kind of nice and simple. The gesso adds a little bit more of roughness to it than just the raw canvas would, but it's generally pretty smooth. Makes for a nice relaxed painting experience. The smoother the canvas is, you tend to have a little bit more time working with it. Whether that be oils or acrylics, you're going to have less absorption with a smoother canvas, and because of that, the paint's going to just kind of sit on top. It's going to allow you to get a lot more detail. Actually, the big not mural project. I have to tilt this. Maybe that painting over there. I think it was another piece of. I don't know if that was a canvas drop cloth piece or not, but that texture was really, really rough because I didn't sand down the canvas before starting that piece, and as a result, what we got out of that, it's a collaborative piece I'm working on with a friend, which is the rocks and the trees and the grass are fairly easy to do. The skin tone and textures that she's working on, it's a lot harder for her because of that rougher texture. You can't get those subtle blends quite as easily. In addition to any kind of detail work, so as soon as you start grabbing a detail brush, you're going to get a lot more of the bumps and ridges in that texture, and you're not going to be able to get smoother, cleaner lines with that. So if you really want to do like portraits and detail work, you're probably going to be working with a smoother canvas. If you want to do more special effects, more landscape-oriented stuff where you don't necessarily need as much detail, or you can kind of fudge the details a little bit more, you can actually let your canvas texture be a little bit rougher. And rougher canvas textures tend to be cheaper. Again, not always, not everything's mutually exclusive in that way, but generally speaking, a smoother canvas is going to be more than a rougher canvas, just out of usage. What else is on that list? Yeah, and like a tighter weave, smoother canvas, they're going to prep easier and better. To use a rougher canvas to get that smoother texture out of it, you tend to be using more gesso, which changes the overall texture and absorption of the canvas, at least to start with. And you tend to need to sand it down a lot more. So a little bit different. Today I'm actually working on a piece of slate. This stuff is generally very smooth, comparable to like a wood canvas. Yeah, that makes sense. A wood panel, and so it really kind of pops and works a little bit differently. This particular high-end acrylic, again on this slate, this doesn't absorb in. It just kind of sits. So I just really have to sit and wait for it to dry when I need to. But it is actually just about dry now. I can probably start my dry brushing layer. But when it comes to whatever you're doing, in whatever, I'm going to need some yellow here. In whatever painting you happen to be doing, whatever happen to be working in, it's like, all right, well, what really is going to be the best choice for me? If you haven't worked or played with different textures of canvas before, I kind of hope this little rant about it has kind of helped you in that regard. But at the same time, I do hope that in thinking about that, you kind of can come to an understanding of, okay, I need to do a little bit more, maybe a little bit less in either direction. And think, okay, maybe I'm going to do more blend work, so I want a smoother canvas. So I don't need to do as much blend work. I'm actually do more thick layering. Actually, rougher textured canvases are great for thick applications of paint because you can really kind of layer that on, and that extra texture will really kind of grab the paint more. If you're doing a lot of texture on a smoother canvas, there is a chance that some of those thicker textures will actually start to kind of pull off, just because there wasn't that same level of absorption on the canvas itself. So think about your subject matter, think about your particular style, your particular process, and reference your paint type and your brushes. A rougher canvas is going to be harder on your brushes. If you specifically if you use a lot of softer synthetic brushes, a rougher canvas is going to wear them out more. Rougher, stiffer brushes might be scraping on the smoother canvas too much, and you might be actually pulling some of that paint away. So you really want to kind of think about your materials, think about how you're working with them, and think about how you want to work with them. If all of that's too confusing, get a medium textured canvas at your arts store, arts and crafts store, and just go with that. Most sort of base level pre-stretched canvases are going to be a medium texture if they don't already tell you what texture it is. We'll say medium texture, awesome, thanks, or medium smooth, or whatever. But yeah, generally speaking, you're going to be getting a medium textured canvas. But thinking about those couple of different variations and variables, you can in fact push your work a little bit further in either direction, specifically in terms of just the texture of your canvas. So that actually covers. Oh, glad I finished that, because my electricity dimmed a little there. That is actually everything that I wanted to cover today. Actually, I hope the power doesn't go out in the middle of this, but if you suddenly see the stream cut, that's why. But yeah, so that's everything that I wanted to. Wow, that's really being screwy. I really hope the electricity doesn't cut out. So that's everything that I wanted to cover today. If you guys have any thoughts, any questions, hanging out in comments here today as I work on this. I'm probably going to spend maybe 15-20 minutes just getting an extra layer on here. If you guys have anything that you heard that I didn't talk about and you want an answer to, or anything you want an answer to that I didn't talk about, let me know over here in comments before I wrap this up, and I will do my best to get to them. I'm actually doing a couple months back I did a video about magical energy. This is a painting tutorial, and the sketch for this is roughly around the time that I came up with that. Actually, I want to have a look at this. This was February that I did the sketch, and I was like, I want to do more of these pieces with sort of this magical energy stuff, and I was like, well, okay. And then it ended up, this is the first chance I've gotten to get to it, despite it being an idea that's now 5 months old. Like, now I'm finally getting to the actual piece that tutorial kind of was a part of. Get some more of this blue in here. Part of the reason why I decided to do this on a piece of slate was that I could get that texture of the rock a lot easier. Makes it a little more fun and a lot easier on me. rock looks suspiciously like a penis. To try and avoid that, I think. Sorry. I exhausted all the stuff I had to talk about. It's just where we are now is the point where I'm working. That looks alright. I'll start making it a little bit warmer. A little more yellow in here. Yeah, it's completely dried at this point. A little bit of water. A little advice from Bob Ross: thin paint sticks to thick paint. Yeah, that's all my video topics. I just did 5 tips and tricks videos in in about an hour. So that's a month's worth of video content that you got today. Not that I'm gonna be like, hey, now I can be lazy. No, I still got to work on stuff. I still have a lot of other ideas I gotta work on. But I also really need to get a painting process video done again. Let's slide this up because I'm really kind of cutting off the. I've actually been using regular flat and bright brushes a lot lately, and haven't even been thinking about picking up around. I've just been doing most of my stuff lately with just like the corners of these flat brushes. I bet I can tilt this a little bit. I might have to actually tilt it the other way. Nope, that's glare is. I'll come up a bit. Maybe a whole butt. Yeah, I feel like that's probably too much, but we'll see. Maybe. That looks better. Yeah, we'll go with that. Now you can actually kind of see what I'm doing a little more. Now, of course, now I've got the glare. That's all right. I know what I'm working on. Watch my time, I got something in the slow cooker. Use some of this color here just as some cast lighting. Don't need that much of it though. Pull that red back out. It's not bad. I'm gonna keep doing this, but I really gotta let this dry. It's the downside. It's like, oh, now I gotta let stuff dry. Crap. Tammy said, should have posted this on Instagram when it's complete. Actually, that's something I don't do with my Instagram. I do not post finished work on my Instagram. Finished work goes to Facebook, and it goes to DeviantArt, and it goes to my own website eventually. But that's my one rule with Instagram is I do not post finished work. But I can certainly post it in progress somewhere towards the end. If you're wondering why that's my rule with Instagram, is a lot of artists have had their work stolen from Instagram. And that's sort of my workaround that is not putting watermarks on everything, is not posting actual finished stuff, unless it's like a sketch that I don't really care about. So speaking of my favorite color schemes, I'm doing a fiery color scheme today. Alright. Pretty solid. Also, also, Tammy, you're implying that I'm going to finish this today, and I'm probably not going to finish this today. Next week, maybe. But I've needed the studio time. I've been coming down and looking at stuff and not working, so it's actually helping to actually be down here and playing around with some of this. Actually, I did get so DeviantArt's going through a major site update. They're still kind of semi in beta right now, but it's called DeviantArt Eclipse. And with any website redesign, there's sort of like some hit and miss. Some people like it, some people don't. Most big redesigns, especially on YouTube, people end up hating it. The most recent YouTube one I've kind of gotten used to. It's mostly just been a stuff for Creator Studio, and if you have any videos where sort of those are hiding and the whole interface and everything. Some stuff's still kind of buggy, but everything like that. But yeah, so DeviantArt Eclipse is a thing that started uh, rolling out to certain artists. And when I saw it, I was like, people are going to complain about this. I can already tell, but I actually really love it. And so I put a request in to get it for my page, and I got it like 2 weeks ago. And I was like, okay, cool. Um, Honestly, what I love about it is it's a lot cleaner. Everything's way more organized. It's definitely way better, probably for a touch interface. So tablets, smartphones, that kind of thing. And it like, and it honestly, everything's cleaner, looks way more professional. And I was like, this is what this site's needed for a long time. Is just to, well, that and to get rid of all the like softcore porn. But uh, since that's not going away on DeviantArt anytime soon, probably. Um, it's mostly just a matter of cleaning up the design and the interface and making it look like the website was designed sometime after the year 2005, because they've been really relying on the same basic design for the website for the past like 15 years, and it's like, come on guys, you gotta get with it a little bit. And seems like they're getting there. So if you go to my DeviantArt page, it should. I'm pretty sure you'll see the new Eclipse version. And for the browsing that I do now, everything's done that way. It's pretty neat. So I need a little bit of white just here, sort of for that upper highlight. I'll at least get that far before I call the stream to a close today. Be really sparing with the white. Actually, tilt this up so I can see it for a change. There we are. Now I'll get the foreground layer on. Why the hell not? I've got paint left over. Just mix everything left I have on the palette together, basically. Got a light gray-ish, blue, white, green, red, sure. Everything comes together. Ochre. Literally whatever I have left on the palette at this point. Yellow. Just to give myself an idea of where I'm going for the next time I come down. Well, I will be forever curious, and if I never see it again, well, if you follow any of my pages, you'll see it at some point. If you only follow me on YouTube, then yeah, you're probably never gonna see it again. But you gotta check me out elsewhere for that. At the very least, in like 3 months, it'll show up on my site. My site's always like the last one to get updated because I'm really bad at about keeping it updated. Actually, I just recently put a bunch of stuff back into my inventory again, because I catalog all my paintings eventually. Usually it ends up being like right before a show. It's like, crap, I haven't cataloged in like 3 months. Now I have a dozen paintings to figure out where they were supposed to be. So I did that this morning. I had like 6 different paintings to catalog. I hadn't done it since like March, early March, maybe February, I don't know. sure I have room for my signature in here somewhere. Eventually. Alright, I'm good with that for today. So, anyone watching out there, thank you for joining me. If you missed one of the 5 different tips / tutorial videos I did over the course of the past hour and a half, actually, I'd say should say past hour, because the past half hour I've just been painting. Feel free to scroll back through the video. It'd probably take about like an hour or so to actually process and show up on the channel, but yeah. So that's all I've got for today. I get to paint, so I'm happy. Actually, I had the chance to paint yesterday, and I never did. I hate myself for it. So, thanks guys for tuning in. This has been Ben from Cinder Studios. If you like this, hit the like button. Helps things out, things spread, and are well reviewed then. Be sure to check out more videos. Sorry I haven't been super active with new stuff lately, specifically tutorials. Actually, don't have a lot of ideas for painting tutorials right now. If you guys have any ideas for painting tutorials, let me know in comments, because I'm out of ideas for tutorials. I've got a lot of tips and tricks kind of videos in the works, but as far as actual new painting tutorials, I'm not sure. One thing coming up, I will say, for next week, later this week, next Saturday, whatever it is, I'm getting in a product from Golden that you can't buy at Blix. So I'll give that as a teaser. It's going to be a really fun highlight video for you guys. That stuff's getting shipped in, I think, Monday. I really wanted it here this weekend, but the order processing didn't go through for like an extra day and a half, so unfortunately I had to bump it back a week. But that should be a fun video for next week. Interesting little product highlight. Outside of that, again, stay subscribed. Check me out on all kind of different pages: Instagram, Facebook, DeviantArt. Where else am I? If you like weird electronic music, I got stuff on SoundCloud. Oh, should at least talk about this. I've got a new blog post for the first time in like over a year. So that is actually on my website, cinderblockstudios.com/blog, as well as on my DeviantArt page as a journal. It's called something like Painting Parties and the Dangers of DIY. Lovely little rant. So check that out additionally this week. Or maybe a year from now when you're watching this live stream, the recorded version. I don't know when you're watching this. So, yeah, check out my blog for interesting articles about the artistic process and community and stuff like that. And I think that's everything I wanted to say. This has been Cinder Studios, and I will see you guys next time.